Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of this Sacred Journey podcast. And today it's a very important moment for me. I feel extremely honored and humbled and excited and delighted to introduce you to this 3-part series episode that is very dear and close to my heart, actually. This is a 3-hour-long interview that I had with one of my dearest teachers and one of the most impactful human beings that I've ever met. His name is Keith, and many people around the world know him as the Cacao Shaman. So I got to record this interview a few months before his passing, which was on January 14, 2024. Exactly one day after his Mayan calendar birthday, which was 1 Achpu. And this is significant because according to the Mayan sacred text, the person that also brought cacao to the world at the beginning of times was also born in 1 Achpu in the Mayan calendar. So for me, it's such an honor and a privilege to have this recorded podcast. And for those of you who don't know who Keith is, I think it is safe to say that Keith played a major role in this cacao renaissance that we're living in the world right now. He played a super important, if not one of the most important roles in the last couple of decades into bringing cacao back into our awareness, into the understanding that this is a sacred medicine that is meant to be used ceremonially and with intention, and that is here to help us heal and move into the next level of our evolution. So during this 3-part series conversation, we get to dive deep into everything cacao. So Keith is walking us from the story of his life and how he got introduced to cacao and his connection to this plant medicine, the spirit of this plant medicine. And throughout this 3-hour conversation, he just walks us into everything we can speak about cacao. Any question that you may have is probably going to be hopefully answered here. It's a deeply inspiring, powerful, emotional, educational, exciting, and we go everywhere here. He's sharing with us all the wisdom that he had around cacao, regarding his connection to cacao in a spiritual, mental, emotional, physical, and even in the scientific level. This man was just like a whole cacao encyclopedia, and I really got to pick his brain around everything that has to do with cacao. So I really hope that you can stay until the end and really sit with all of this wisdom that we have the privilege to receive right now from this beautiful man that dedicated a huge part of his life to this medicine and to bring this medicine to the world. So without further ado, here is Keith. I hope you enjoy. All right, well, hello.
There we go. All right.
Yes, we're here. So welcome to another episode. And today I'm very, very delighted and honored to introduce a very special guest. I even get chills and I may have some tears of emotion through this talk, because we're going to speak about a topic that is very dear to my heart, which is the medicine of cacao. And today we're sitting with a legend, a truly legendary man, the cacao wizard, Keith. And we're sitting in his house at this porch. In Guatemala, you may hear some noises on the background with construction next door and the tuk-tuks passing by, but that's Guatemala. So hopefully it won't be so disruptive. But coming back in the kitty here, I just wanted to thank you, Keith, for opening your home, for opening the space, and for being willing to share with us some of your journey with cacao. And before we start, I wanted to speak to those of you who've never heard of Keith or who don't know who Keith is. Keith is a major character that played a huge role on the reintroduction of cacao on the Western world. So right now, if you have been singing with cacao, ecstatically dancing with cacao, meditating with cacao, going to cacao ceremonies nowadays, just know that a lot of these lineages root back to Keith, because he's the one that started this movement a couple of decades ago, and he's going to share with us a lot about his journey with cacao and how, in a way, he's been bringing it back to us. So thank you, Keith, again, and without further ado, now I pass the microphone to you.
All right. Oh my. Well, I got to Guatemala in 2003. And with the idea of settling in this little town and starting or at least continuing a therapeutic practice system, spending some time here. And when I got here, what I knew about chocolate was called Hershey's.
Wow.
And I had missed the early part of the raw foods movement and their fascination with cacao. Of course, it's not really raw, but we won't bust their bubble. And I'd been too busy caving and climbing and walking into the blank spots on other people's maps and things like that. So I got here ready to settle back into being a therapist. And met this big cosmic energy. I'd worked with plant spirit medicines before. I'd worked with higher dimensional beings, so I knew what it was like to be contacted by a multidimensional spirit, but couldn't figure out what this was. And I'm asking all kinds of questions, and of course I get it down to where it is sort of, but not quite, a plant spirit, a deva. And so, okay, are you one of the plants around here? No. And and finally I figure out it's the spirit of chocolate. And my first reaction was, this is a joke. Chocolate is good for PMS, but and like anybody else, I'd known chocolate since I was a kid. So I didn't get this at all. Now here comes our little neighbor kitty cat. I didn't understand this at all. But I liked the energy, and I said, tentatively, because you can always say no, is that, okay, let's do this thing. Whatever you got, let's do this thing. Wherever you're here, let's do it. And about a week and a half later, I was sitting on the boat taxi that gets people around the lake from village to village where I am. And I ended up sitting next to a botanist who had a project on the other side of the mountains. And I went with her and, I don't know, half a dozen other people to visit her project site, which was about the biggest tree in the rainforest, called, the old name is Ramon, the present name is Maya Nut, the local name is Uhushte. And we went to visit this project site, and because I'd spent that intervening week and a half in the internet cafe and had seen pictures of cacao, of the plant, of some of the processing, and so I saw the plant around the village. I saw the beans drying in people's yards, normal, what you would expect, with way up in the rainforest peoples who are making their living off of coffee and rubber and bananas and cacao and whatever else they can grow. And we went through a discussion with this lady that, the tree, it's the biggest tree in the rainforest. It's a canopy tree. You don't climb it. But it drops these nuts in the forest floor, and the entire the little kids can go out with baskets and the whole family can pick them up. And it keeps, and it's highly nutritious. And the women said that their health went up, their birth weights went up, their births were easier. And 5 years later, what they called the Ahushde babies are the smartest kids in school. Well, so I asked them if I could have some of their cacao, and they said no, but if you come back in a week, we'll have some made for you. So I went back in a week. Takes about 5 hours to get there from here. Walked 45 minutes up in the rainforest, got my cacao, brought it back here, had a cup the next morning, and within an hour I rang the cacao spirit up on the cosmic telephone that we all have, that we've all been taught we don't have, but anyway. And said, basically, okay, I've got one of this planet's most important medicine plants running around in my body that doesn't work like any medicine plant I've ever had. It's not taking me on a trip, but the doors are wide open. Connection to other dimensions of myself, to other beings, everything is easier, smoother. And so basically I got the instruction from her to, find out. Play with this. See what happens. And I drank cacao almost every day. I did my sessions with other people. I eventually began to share it with them as a part of the session. And I started learning about cacao. I spent a lot of time on the internet with the medical stuff, the anthropological stuff, the chemical stuff, all of it. And I learned. And I started getting information from the cacao spirit that was not out there in the anthropological literature about cacao. It just wasn't there. Wow. And so I realized I'm being given information that's not known. Wow. And that sort of grew into 3 years of travel from southern Mexico to northern Panama, where, it helped that I had a girlfriend in Costa Rica, so that made it an expat from the States down there. And that helped a lot. But I would buy cacao beans in markets from indigenous peoples, from growers, from plantations. I'd visit chocolate making factories. And I'd get a box of little bags of cacao in the truck. And when I got to about 60 bags, I'd go somewhere, go to the beach where the water's as warm as a bathtub, or go way up in the mountains and walk way out there through the cloud forest where one morning in my little scooped out water supply stream source, there was a kitty cat paw print the size of my hand. I got big hands. So, wow. I learned the incredible variability that cacao has. Mostly, I think it's genetics. There are 2 major hybrid varieties, and then there's the local, basically wild variety, what's left over from cacao that the shamans planted in the last 1,000 years.
Is that the one that we know as criollo?
Yes.
Criollo cacao.
Which is basically a Spanish term that means local, native, or wild. In other words, it's the crap stuff that nobody wants. So the seeds are smaller, they're harder to peel, they don't produce as well, but the energy is a world of difference, and that's what you're drinking now.
Yes. By the way, I'm drinking Keith's cacao cup. So that would be the most potent cacao as well, because it's the most original, the one that has the most.
Well, the Spanish started breeding cacao once it became famous in Europe. The Spanish started breeding it for higher productivity, larger seeds, and partially for flavor. For their market, when they figured out how to add sugar to it, and then they figured out how to add milk to it. So that that journey was what the Spanish were interested in. They had absolutely no interest in the what the original inhabitants of Central and South America used cacao for. They had was irrelevant. So when you go through several hundred years of selective breeding, you get what you're breeding for, and the things you're not breeding for, like the active chemical compounds that affect your consciousness, they go down. Anyway, what happened was that I realized that this was a major spiritual connecting tool.
My next question would be, so when you started this journey with cacao, which was 20 years ago, right, here in Guatemala, and you say that you were contacted directly by the cacao spirit because you had already been connecting to other plant medicine spirits that were guiding you in different ways.
And medicinal.
Medicinal. Yes,
spirits.
So you like tinctures, you were working with herbs, right?
Yeah.
This is what I gathered. But I have a question, like back in the day, because we know now, historically, that our ancestors, like the Mayan people and the Aztecs, used to work with cacao in a ceremonial way. And then
No, actually we don't.
We don't know? It's kind of like a metaphor. Like, or like...
No, the main Mayan culture was gone.
Okay.
400 years before the first conquistadores got here. The Aztecs were still here.
Okay.
But there's almost nothing recorded in the literature that the conquistadores made about what the Aztecs did with the cacao.
Wow.
In the few books that did survive that were not burned from the Mayans, the most famous of which is the Popol Vuh,
Yeah.
there's a lot of information in there about cacao and who brought it, where it came from, that it basically became like a deity in their culture. But there's not a lot of information about what they did with it. Whether it was used ceremonially, whether it was used in sporting events, whether it was, we know that the Toltecs and the Olmecs and then the Mayans and then the Aztecs killed each other over control of the area that's right on the other side of the mountains from here, which has according to them, the best cacao.
Okay.
We know that happened. We know they fought wars over control of the crop in those areas. But we know almost nothing else. There is one family, Tata and a Nana, a couple, that we know here in Guatemala that use cacao. And they call me the grandfather for for my mission of reintroducing cacao to the non-indigenous world. They tell me that I am the first Westerner in 500 years to understand cacao. So that's quite an honor. I also have the same Nawal, which is the Mayan calendar birthday there's like 17 different Mayan calendars, and I'm using the one they use here. I have the same Nawal as the person in the Popol Vuh who brought cacao to the people.
Oh my gosh, I got chills.
And so they see me as having a mission with this, and I suppose that's true because we started sessions and then ceremonies and then hiking and then cacao yoga and cacao breathwork and cacao kirtans and cacao ecstatic dancing, and they all started right here.
Yes,
at
in
this
San
house.
Marcos, in
Yes.
this house.
Right here, this house.
We are in the heart of it.
And then spread all over the world. Now we are moving it into sports.
Wow.
We have Olympic level, that category of sports people. We have bodybuilders. We have people that, they go to the gym and they tell us that they drink cacao. They put more weight on the machine. They do more sets with more reps in each set. It goes to a lot of artists and musicians who use it for creativity. And I got a message a while back about somebody that said, hey, I gave your cacao to everyone in the band and the producer and whoever else is in the studio session. And he said, the track went down with more magic and fewer takes than ever. And so it was much easier to post-session mix the track because there weren't as many tracks, and they were all really good quality. And he said, we got out of the studio so fast that we saved far more money than the cacao cost. So we're seeing that happen. We're seeing it move into the world of autism, ADD, ADHD, where it can make a huge difference in people. We're watching it. I mean, there's a list this long of things that it does medically. It reduces your heart attack, stroke, it cleans your arteries of plaque, your high blood pressure goes down with regular use. I mean, cardiovascular problems go down to 8% of what they are in the normal population. Cancer goes down to 16%. Adult onset diabetes, 39%, which is huge. All these kinds of things, and now it's very rapidly moving into the business world for productivity and prioritizing your day and those kinds of things. People get a lot more work done. It's being used when you have a board session or you have a brainstorming session. Everybody gets together to figure out how to do this new project for the company, all that kind of stuff. And when everybody's had a cup of cacao, the individual agendas go way down, and people are much, much better able, instead of pushing their 2 cents worth, and you can spend 3 hours in a meeting and get nothing done.
Yeah.
Instead of pushing their 2 personal cents worth, they join the group energy.
Speaking of that, like, you reminded me of, I heard somewhere that in the Mayan people, or some of our ancestors, used it in gatherings to make decisions for the community, right? Like, I don't know if you've heard about this, but this is something that I've heard possibly from a Mayan elder, that they would use cacao to sit with, like, the main leaders with the decision making for what would be best for the community, because they would do something similarly, drop into the heart, and from there make a decision that would benefit the whole. And
yes, in general, they work on a consensus level.
yeah,
They don't do anything unless everybody agrees. The Zapatistas in southern Mexico work in the same way, and cacao can very much help that kind of an orientation, where cacao is famous for opening the heart.
yeah,
And I mean, there have been cacao bars where you do what you do in a bar. You talk to people, you listen to music, but there's no alcohol, because alcohol works by reducing fear. Cacao works by opening your heart. They're very different energies. And this kind of thing is being discovered. Hopefully, they've got themselves some good cacao without a whole lot of caffeine in it.
yeah.
But we don't mind all the competition, because it's spreading cacao in the world. And sooner or later, people hear about us, and they try our cacao, and they realize it's different. I mean, I can show you the lab tests. It's totally ridiculously obvious. It's extreme obvious. So, okay.
With that, I have a question. Sorry to interrupt you, but you were speaking about that your cacao specifically is criollo. It's like it's the original. And I've heard, because I've studied cacao quite a bit, and I've heard from different sources that some people say that finding criollo, originally criollo right now, is really difficult, because there's so many varieties of, there's been so much cross-pollination, natural cross-pollination.
Oh, yeah.
Apparently, it's really hard to, even in a farm of just criollo, to find just originally criollo. So there's always some sort of mix. And I wanted to ask you about it, because you're...
Well, the place we used to get our cacao, or started getting the cacao, they planted so many highly productive hybrids that the cacao lost its quality.
Yeah.
And not only that, cacao goes through a fermentation process. Cacao is chocolate is both a fermented and a sprouted food. But the criollo and the hybrids take different amounts of time to ferment. And so if they're all put together, and the criollo is fermented at the longer, basically about double time period than the criollo wants, the criollo gets basically damaged. It gets acidy and sour, and while it can still have a good combination of compounds, it doesn't taste right.
Yeah.
And it's all mixed in with everything anyway. So we have been fortunate to be able to find the cacao we want. This year was a nightmare, because there was a lot of wind down on the coast. And the cacao flowers are pollinated by practically microscopic little insects. And they got blown away. So we couldn't buy quite as much as we wanted. We got 40,000 pounds. And this fall, in the wave that comes on, we'll see about getting some more. If the tiny little midges or whatever they are have recovered. But it's you never know. You're dealing with a product of nature that we don't control.
But before that, you let me thinking earlier when you were telling us the story about how you have the same nahual as the person that introduced cacao to the Mayans in the Popol Vuh.
Yes.
I'm curious, what is your Nahual? What is
Uno Apu,
Uno Apu? And what does that mean?
number one son.
Wow.
So
Wow.
I really didn't think much of it because I'm not a Mayan calendar follower.
Yeah.
There are a number of people here in town who are. And but it certainly impressed her
Yeah.
as being,
Yeah.
I mean, it helped her understand that I'm literally, I got this mission. And it has taken absolutely countless hours in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
The cacao spirit told me that eventually local shamans at the lake would begin using cacao. And when I made a connection with the cacao spirit, the first thing I did was go talk to the local shamans. And they said, well, it doesn't grow here. And it doesn't. We're too high in elevation. It's too cool. And there's a long dry season. And so it needs middle to lower elevation rainforest on the Pacific slope or in eastern Guatemala. And it was 12 years before the first Mayan shaman, you know, she makes her money off the tourists. And all these tourists would come expecting to find cacao, and they would find alcohol and tobacco and candles. And they're going,
Where's the cacao?
where's the cacao? And so she instantly became a cacao expert with a huge family lineage of cacao use, just for the tourists. And there's some other shamans here that laugh about that, and we laugh about that. But
Yeah, because speaking of that, like I've been coming to the lake since 2015, 2016 probably. And back in the day, you were the only person that was really introducing cacao to the people.
yeah, there was nobody else.
Nobody else. And I remember coming with a lot of curiosity. I wanted to meet the Mayans that were serving cacao. I wanted to meet go to the original cacao ceremonialists with the Mayan elders, and there was none. There was none that were practicing it or sharing it publicly to the people. And I knew how I got to the lake was through my yoga teacher who was working with cacao, because she was your student for many months. Her name is Ananda. You
yes.
probably know her, yes?
Oh, yeah.
So during my yoga teacher training, I got introduced to my first cacao ceremony through her. And then eventually she always spoke about you as being her teacher for many years, how she learned from you. And that's how I ended up here. So I remember sitting at the lake back in the day when this place was not very known worldwide. Like now, everyone in the world knows about Lake Atitlan, and everyone wants to come to go to the Eagle's Nest and do the ecstatic dances. But back in the day, there was very few people here that were true spiritual seekers that would find themselves in this lake somehow. And we would sit in your porch. There were all these kinds of things always happening at the lake, right? Kirtan, yoga. It's like a spiritual mecca, I would say, in this little town. But the cacao lineage would always trace back to you. So we would sit in your porch every Sunday and come to your sessions every Sunday, a group of us that would be doing this galactivations, empath work with the cacao spirit, led by you. And right now, like from all of those people that I remember sitting in the porch with you, right now a lot of them are out in the world doing big things in the world, doing big changes, you know.
Oh, yes.
Big changes, creating huge movements like cacao and ecstatic dances, for example, with many people that originated from the lake. And you know, kirtan, yoga, and ecstatic dance, and cacao, so many things that branched out. And this is something that I really love about cacao, because it is a plant that to me feels very novel in the sense that it gives permission. It allows, it gives like space for people to be creative.
Yeah, we call it a connection and partnership facilitator.
Yeah.
It helps you to connect to whatever you want to connect to, whether that's your sweetheart, your spiritual practice, your business, what, dancing,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that I really love about the medicine, that it allows you to build your own relationship with her directly, and it's a very gentle way to be introduced. But going back to that, like, this is something that I really want to touch upon, because right now in the world in general, with every spiritual practice, there's a lot of talk about cultural appropriation, whether you
Yes.
call it ayahuasca, whether you call it cacao, whether you call it whatever, including yoga sometimes. There's a lot of controversy regarding the cultural appropriation, and I wanted to speak about this with you, and ask you about your opinion on this, and also just from witnessing the evolution of cacao, at least in this town, in this part of the world, firsthand, and through the people that I know that have been coming here for decades, to the Lake Atitlan, where pretty much this is the heart mecca of like where cacao like started growing and sprouting, at least in the Western world, right? And I wanted to acknowledge the fact that at least back in the day, there was at least here, there was no Mayan people practicing with the cacao. They were doing their Mayan ceremonies, their fire ceremonies. They were speaking about the calendar, and there was only few of them, because they also, in a way, I believe with the colonization, they got disconnected from their own roots, and that it has been a process for them to reconnect, and also to feel safe to share. Because I know even recently there's been cases that Mayan people were being persecuted for sharing their wisdom by their own people, which is it's
Everything.
it's so wild to think. And I feel like it's in the very recent years that they start to feel a little more safe sharing and coming up to the world, and reintroducing this medicine as their plant ally. So I wanted to open this topic with you, and expand on that.
Yeah, this was basically a non-issue until the cancel culture got going.
Yeah.
Until there began to be a lot of people who felt that they had the right to tell you how to believe and what to do.
Yeah.
This is something rather new on this planet. That they get to control you.
Yeah.
They're right and you're wrong. And what we saw happen here, and I, of course, had discussions with the cacao spirit about it, and her take on it was basically people. A person or a people don't control me. People or an entire culture do not tell me what to do and who I can and can't work with. That's my business. That's my choice. And what I got from her was anything else is arrogance. Is that I don't tell the cacao spirit what to do. I work for the cacao spirit. I follow her, and she doesn't really tell me what to do. You know, most of it comes in through intuition anyway. So, but she's always available for things like this, and basically said, "What? You think people get to own a global level medicine plant? I don't think so." But I've had people tell me that using the word ceremony is cultural appropriation. And so I said to them, "So you're a bastard. So you're an illegitimate child. Your parents had a marriage ceremony that was invalid because they took the term ceremony. And so you're an illegitimate child, yes?" You know, basically they don't know what to say to that. So we have to deal with them here. They are very loud, and they often come on if somebody posts a thing on Facebook for a cacao ceremony, they often come on very loud and very attacking. That the Mayan culture owns cacao. You know? Well, I played with cacao for 12 years before there was another Mayan that used cacao here. So, whatever. we basically don't worry about it because this era where it is normal that I feel uncomfortable if you have a different opinion than I do. I can't handle it emotionally. I'm not mature enough to handle somebody else with a different opinion. So I have to attack, not your opinion, but I have to attack you. That is the difference. When you see somebody attacking the person rather than the information or the opinion, then you know you're dealing with someone who emotionally cannot handle it inside. And it makes them nervous. It makes them uncomfortable. Maybe they can't sleep at night. So they got to shut someone else up or get them to believe the way they think is the truth. Well, okay. So we run into that a lot. We also run into the opposite thing, where there are numerous tatas and nanas, Mayan shamans, who say, what? What is in your heart? That's what rules. What is in your heart? Are you taking cacao to make a profit? That's what's in your heart. Are you helping this planet out? That's what's in your heart. That's what matters. They don't see the world in this culture and that culture, this race, that race. They don't see the world in those terms.
Love that.
Okay?
That's so beautiful because I had that experience in 2018. I came with 2 other women from the States, and we all worked with cacao in different ways. We were sharing it, whether it was through yoga or through women's circles or sound journeys. One of them was based in California, one of them was based in New York, and one of them, the one in California, was being called out for cultural appropriation, and she was very affected by it. And she really was sitting with that question because she didn't want to be culturally appropriating. She really honored this medicine. So she took the time to come back down here, and I joined her in her travels, and we went down to visit different farms and to go around Guatemala to visit different Guatemalan elders. And it was really beautiful. We had this one experience that really touched our heart. It was a group of people from all over the world who, like from New Zealand, from Iceland, from everywhere in Europe, from the States. It was like a group of 30 of us that we were coming to learn more about cacao, and that we were already working with cacao in our hometowns. So we sat with this elder and we asked that question, like, how do you feel about people like us, like Westerners coming here and learning from this plant, learning from your traditions, and taking this plant medicine and taking it to our home and sharing it? And the answer of this person really like everyone was crying by the end of this, because his answer was, we feel very honored and we feel very grateful that there's people out there that care enough about our culture that are willing to dedicate their lives and even travel all the way here to meet with us and to learn from us and take this and share it with the world. And that was not an answer that any of us expected. We probably all expected the backlash of the cultural appropriation or whatever, and everyone was in tears because it felt so genuine. And when we asked more questions, the Mayan elders were telling us we were actually worried that our tradition was going to get lost because the young people in our the younger Mayan people were losing interest in their culture, and they were afraid that their traditions were going to get lost. So for them, we represented a hope. We represented hope that the world was going to continue with their lineage somehow, and that what they had to share with the world was not going to get lost. That there were still people that cared enough to dedicate ourselves enough, to even care enough to come all the way to sit with them and to really learn from them. And that really touched me, and I feel like that's truly what, if we like you said, like if we go directly to speak to the spirit of Cacao, I feel like that's what she wants. If we go directly to speak to spirit, to the earth, what she wants is for all her children to come together, no matter the race, no matter where you come from, no matter the background, as long as your heart is in it, as long as your heart is pure. That's what matters. It's a time to come together, to come in union, to stop the separation, to stop the fight. Like this whole talk about who does it right, who does it wrong, I feel like it's creating distraction from what really matters. And what really matters right now is that we're in a world where there's a lot of chaos, where we've been dealing with a lot of chaos for thousands of years, and right now we're being called to shift that, to change that energy, to come together as one and create a new pathway where we co-create together, when we honor each other, when we honor all the traditions, and we come from a pure space of appreciation.
So if that's true,
Yeah.
you're going to get the opposite
Yeah.
of people that want to divide other people and have them fight against each other, basically as part of distracting from what's really going on.
Yeah.
I had a friend of mine come to the door to buy another block, and I, like, what are you doing with this stuff? You don't meditate, and he didn't. And he said, well, I'm a writer. I write short stories. And what I like to do in my short stories is I like to take 3 storylines and weave those storylines together. Let's see if that comes out on camera. Yeah, all right, good. And he said, when I have a cup of your cacao, obviously I've been experimenting with it, he said, I can hold 9 simultaneous storylines in my brain and weave all 9 into my short story. People like the short story. It makes sense. They don't get lost. It's not too complicated to read. And, he got his block of cacao, and I went, that's a 3 times brain expansion. From 3 storylines to 9 storylines. So I was beginning to realize these things about cacao, and I sat with the cacao spirit one morning, having my cacao, and I said, all right, what is the big picture? What I obviously I see what an amazing thing I've got here. I also see that nobody else on the web, apparently, I can't find anybody else that understands what I understand, even though it's ridiculously obvious. I'm not finding anybody else. So what am I doing?
Yeah.
What am I doing with this crazy substance, and why? What's the global level big picture? And she did one of her usual things. She says, okay, we'll take care of it. Just tell me.
Yeah.
But about a week later, I was in the little internet cafe. Back then we had, the only place you could go for internet was 2 little cafes. So anyway, I was into this anthropological journal and doing what I had been doing, which is copy and paste it into a Word doc, bring the Word doc back here, and over the next 3 days I could read all that stuff. And I read in this anthropological journal a myth from Central and I think South America that was recorded in the anthropological journal that said, when mankind gets out of alignment with the natural world, cacao comes out of the rainforest to open people's hearts and reestablish the balance.
Wow.
And so I went, oh,
Wow.
that's what I'm doing. I'm helping cacao to come out of the rainforest, to open people's hearts, and reestablish the balance. And I have apparently been asked to do that.
Wow.
And
this is a prophecy, you said? It's a prophecy?
it was a myth recorded by anthropologists from cultures.
Wow.
There's a bunch of them. I collected them for a while. Want to hear my favorite one?
Yes. Please.
Okay. So there are people all over Central America, all the way up, especially in southern Mexico, where they had various flowers that they mixed with cacao. And every little culture and every little group has their favorite thing to mix with cacao. If you go to the market across the lake, you get cacao mixed with corn flour. And a friend of mine bought some, asked, is this cacao? And then he said yes. They didn't say anything about the corn. He mixed up a cup, and the spoon stood straight up in the cup.
Whoa.
There was so much thickness from the corn flour. That's the way they do it here. There's all kinds of stuff that people add to cacao. Besides the chili or the sweetening or, whatever. Anyway, there's this myth, and there's several versions of it, where one of the typical versions is there's a Mayan priestess who falls in love with a commoner, and which is a great big no-no in the culture. So they get caught together, and they are both executed. They're both put to death for this breach of protocol. But they loved each other so much that they came back as chocolate and vanilla. So they would always be together.
Wow.
There's a lot of stories like that in the literature. And so still today, chocolate and vanilla are often found together.
Yes.
So these two lovers are still together. And so I did a lot of the anthropology like that. And then the cacao spirits started giving me anthropological information that was not in the literature.
Wow.
And I would put it up on my website.
Okay.
Wow. So it could be, see what happened to it. But one of the biggest things was, I've got the book in there on the shelf from the leading anthropologist who studies cacao, and he wrote a book on it, on basically the anthropology and all of this stuff about cacao. And there's the expression that the conquistadores found when they got here for not for cacao, not for the cacao tree, but for chocolate that you would drink, was chocolatl, which eventually in France became chocolate. That word. And if you read standard internet descriptions, the translation of that chocolatl is heart blood.
Wow.
Now, this anthropologist says, no, that's incorrect. The translation is blood, and it's about all the, bloody sacrifices they did, and pulling people's hearts out. And, he's talking Aztec here.
Yes.
And he says, no, that's incorrect. And I got the information from the cacao spirit that, no, it is heart blood. And the cacao spirit said, now you got to understand, indigenous languages in this part of the world are poetic. Everything is poetry, metaphor, allegory, analogy. And if you can speak, at least this way it used to be, if you can speak really flowery and beautifully, you basically have community status because you're eloquent. And so I understood that, and the cacao spirit said, okay, poetically speaking, what is the blood that flows through the heart? Poetically speaking, it's love. Yes?
Yes.
Poetically speaking.
Yes.
And Linnaeus, the Swiss father of scientific or botanical nomenclature, called it Theobroma cacao, food of the gods. What's the food of the gods? What would they eat? Love.
Wow.
So that seems to have been understood, at least at some point. And as a result of the anthropologists and being all excited about the blood sacrifices and everything else that the Aztecs made, maybe the Mayans too, I don't really know. And we all know that cacao opens the heart. It's apparently understood at a subconscious level because we give chocolate on Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
I mean, people just know. Even though the chocolate's crap and doesn't do anything to your heart,
Yes,
we
for
still do
sure.
it. So I sort of made it my purpose to do, to make chocolate that did those things. That had the energy and the compounds, and we started calling it ceremonial grade because back then we were working mostly with the ceremonies and not all these other things. Started calling it ceremonial grade, and now everybody calls their cacao ceremonial grade. We never bothered to trademark the term.
So you started that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we didn't bother to trademark the term.
Yeah.
Thought about it, but basically the cacao spirit said it'll spread faster if you don't trademark it. You let anybody use it. So that's what we did. And I mean, I just last month read on one of the Facebook pages for this community where someone was saying the definition of ceremonial grade cacao is if it has intention put into it. And that's not the definition. But I understand that these other companies don't have ceremonial grade cacao. They do not have cacao that has low caffeine and the compounds and energies to support your journey. They don't have it. They don't sell it. Most of them don't even know what it is. And so they have to make up a new definition of ceremonial grade in order to be able to say there's a ceremonial grade. So it's been a really interesting journey. And we're having fun watching it all.
Yeah.
And we certainly understand that there's a lot of people, indigenous and Westerners in this town, who have a lot of resentment. I mean, here we are, the biggest cacao company in the world, and the only one whose sales went up last year. And we got a bunch of enemies.
Yeah.
We got a bunch of people who are looking for any possible way they can put us down. I saw about a year ago, somebody said they have trucks bring their cacao, from the rainforest. 6 hours driving. Think I'm going to hire people to walk it on their backs to get it here. You know?
Yes.
Like, he was complaining that we had trucks bring our cacao to our workshop.
Wow. Yeah.
Very strange.
It's interesting what's happening, because what brings up for me the question, you know, like, again, we're working with the medicine of love, the medicine of, I would like to say, even the medicine of community, because I've like, from what we were speaking earlier, you know, like when even businesses or if our elders got together and made decisions for the community, I like to see that as a metaphor of how cacao actually grows, and how it needs like a tree that gives it shade, and how it like likes to have
Yes.
the vanilla grow next to it, and the cardamom and all of this stuff. So again, we're working with a medicine that activates the heart, brings us into union, yet at a human level, we see it how it's bringing up a lot of the distortions that are around.
Oh, it brings them right up.
and it might be part of the healing process. It might be part, because as a collective, we're holding so much trauma, so much
Huge amounts.
competitive ideas, and how so much like we're wired to process and work in this ways of division, competition, like projecting our traumas and our hurt on other people. So I guess this is just like coming up right now for me, for both of us to like contemplate on, and also to like see. I want to hear your opinion on this, but knowing you also as someone that works with a lot of emotional processing and empath training, and you've helped so many people, including myself and so many of my teachers in the lake, work with this subjects of.
If we're going to go into this new world, this dream of light, this, for some people, this Garden of Eden,
Yeah.
where, you know, there are ETs that say, in the future, it will be the number one priority of every country on your planet to return this country to a garden. You know, forests, green living things, all of that. Now, if that's true, I mean, I used to do detox in the 1970s with fasting, diet, herbs, and a few supplements. And you would see all kinds of really ugly things come out of people's bodies. You know, out of the skin, out of the, end up in the toilet, out of the vagina. I watched tumors, and people knew they had the tumor because they'd been diagnosed, and the tumor moved through the bowel or the uterine wall and then went out into the toilet or out during the menstrual flow. I used to have one in a jar. The lady fished it out of the toilet during her period, and it was this mass about this big around with all these little tentacles coming out of it, you know, where it was like attached to her body. And she washed it all up, and she put it in a jar, and she poured some vodka over it, you know, as a preservative, and she gave it to me.
Whoa.
And oh my God, it looked evil. It looked like shit. I don't want to touch that. So globally, we're going through a detox of the dark shadow, of the pain body, of the wounded inner child, of the density. There's a lot of terms out there for it. And the way that works is it has to come up from inside to the conscious level where you feel it. Now, when you're feeling it, if you believe what it's telling you and you follow its guidance, then you behave that way. Because you think you are perceiving the truth from within rather than the detoxification, especially on the emotional level and belief system level. And so you're going to behave that way. And you're going to think you're in truth because it came from your inner knowing. And so, for me, I think there's a lot of people out there, corporations, in government, in agencies, in all of this, that have basically volunteered to be wicks. You know, a candle wick takes the liquid wax up the wick where it can burn. And for me, I think these bad actors have volunteered to be wicks to help get this negativity out of the mass consciousness so it can burn. So it can, well, first be seen by the public at large. Okay, what do you got to see? Do you got to see that Big Pharma is interested in keeping you sick so it can make more money on you and has nothing to do with getting you well? Are you going to see that big media is completely paid off and owned, and they no longer know what to do except lie to you? Are you going to see that if you're a political official and you don't stuff your pockets, and you're going to be told how to vote anyway by the puppet masters, you know, all of these kinds of things, are you going to see that? Are you going to wake up and take a look at that? Let this stuff clear from the planet, and then let's all play another game. Is it going to be ugly the next few years? Woo-wee! Oh, yeah. It's going to be quite the shit show. Which is, well, we all came here for this. It's basically the most exciting time on planet Earth. Since whenever.
The history of humanity.
Yeah. Are you gonna start dealing with your extraterrestrial connections? Are you going to accept that history is profoundly distorted? Are you going to accept that since World War II, the United States has lost every single war it's gotten into, and it wants to do it again in the Ukraine? You know, are you going to accept that? That there are some people who control the government and they only want war. They cannot rest if young men are not out there killing somebody. They can't, literally can't handle it. Are you going to accept that a small group of psychopaths run the world and want to control everybody else and turn you into a serf? And so you can live in the little huts and they can live in the castle? And that's their dream come true? Are you going to accept that one of the major parties and a good bit of the other party in the United States, political party, are flat out communists and they don't even hide it anymore? And communists believe that they should own everything you have. You shouldn't own anything. You know, there's just an endless list of that stuff. And of course, that labels me.
And how do you think we can transcend that? Like...
Well, I think we're well on the way of doing that. But a lot more people got to die from the vax. And until people finally get it, that the vax has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with COVID. It's a eugenics. It's a mass murder plot. Personally, I don't think that they'll pull another one. I don't think it'll work. I think it'll be stopped. But I don't know. No, I'm good with that. It's totally crazy out there right now. Whatever your political persuasion is, you are either absolutely convinced that the conservatives are going to ruin everything, or you're absolutely convinced that the liberals are going to ruin everything and have already done that. So where does it end? I don't know. But what I see when I look at it on other levels is that it's going to work out fine. I have no idea what we're going to do with these bad actors. My personal opinion that a lot of the people in Big Pharma who are looking forward to, as the president of Pfizer says, he thinks this COVID was a nice practice for what's coming. I personally would like to see those people hung. I think that as mass murderers, there's a lot of people out there who, what are you going to do?
Yeah. And at a personal level, like now, like bringing it in individually, like what can we do at an individual level to move through these big changes that are happening in the world? And
there is only one thing.
Yeah.
Raise your vibration. You raise your vibration, various parts of your pain body, your wounded inner child, will become incompatible with a higher vibration. They'll rise to the surface, to the conscious level, and you can let go of them. Or bring your higher dimensional friends in and transmute them, or any of a number of things. But basically, if you want to see the new world, you got to go there personally. There's no other way to do it, because reality is feedback. And so, as it says in the third thing in our spiritual relationships text, nothing changes until you do. And so you want things to change, you want the world to change, you have to change. And there just is no shortcut to that. There's no way around it. And that is one of the reasons why cacao has become so popular as we started calling it in the beginning, the food for the shift.
Food for the shift.
Yeah. And to help people to open and connect their consciousness in whatever way is relevant for them. And we've got in the business, we basically established a wholesale model. We're looking at other possibilities now, but we established a wholesale model that used practitioners. People who bought our cacao, they resold it, they got a commission, they did ceremonies with it, they did, whatever. And we got 600 of them now.
Wow.
Over 600. And so it's, my goodness, it just grew. It got bigger and bigger. And, well, personally, for me, I think the best thing about the whole business is that we've got 22 Mayan families in this community that we basically support.
Here in San Marcos?
Here in San Marcos, both from the ones that work here in the workshop and the ones that take the beans home and peel them at home where they can be with beans on the stove and the kids and the family.
Yeah.
So they don't have to be in order to have employment, they don't have to leave their home, except to walk here and get some cacao and take it home. They don't have to be an away parent in order to make an income for their family. And to me, that's one of the basic reasons we never, I mean, besides getting the mold and stuff like that out of the beans, that we never went to machine peeling, which would be a lot faster and a lot cheaper, but there's literally between 10 and 12 families out of a job if we do that. And I'm not going to do that. And so our cacao costs a little more. Costs us a little more. But we do what we do.
It's supporting the community, it's supporting the land, it's supporting.
Yeah. And I mean, as I said earlier, I do what I do because it makes sense. And the other thing that the cacao, I mean, besides all these families in town that we are supporting, and of course they are then supporting the local shops and all of that sort of thing, so it spreads, is that I met my sweetheart Barbara in the States, and I had to return to Guatemala. We spent about a week and a half together, and so we connected back and forth on the internet a little bit. There was enough bandwidth then you could actually chat back and forth rather than just type. Some days. Sometimes all you could do is type back and forth at each other. And at a certain point, we were feeling really connected, and we really liked each other, and we really enjoyed each other when we were together. And I basically said, well, look, why don't you fly down to Guatemala for a visit? And if you do that, the bed is on top of 200 pounds of chocolate, and you can have all you want. Did you ever hear a better line?
It's probably bad.
Well, it worked. I'm still with her.
Wow. 15 years later, right?
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. So I'm very happy.
Yeah.
Obviously, and
she's like your vanilla to your chocolate.
Yes.
We're speaking earlier.
Well, we consider it. It just had to be.
Nice.
It had to be. And that line, quote unquote, gives me a great joke. And I have never, in, I don't know, like 15 years of telling that joke, I have never had anybody tell me that they knew of a better line to get the girl.
Nope. No,
and I never used it on anybody else. All it took is one.
The one. You took the one.
So
amazing.
Anyway, we can, at this point, 14, 15 years later, we don't even have a count. We can both laugh at it, but we're very glad it happened.
Yes.
And it was fun.
Yes. It's been really beautiful for me through the years to witness your love, Barbara and you, and to sit in the porch and have both of you sitting together and serving the cacao, and her always being this really strong supportive energy behind everything that you do. So
she's the power, I'm the mouth. That's what we say.
Yes, I love it.
And even when she's not sitting next to me, she is there. She's always there.
She's here right now.
Yeah, and
in the other room, but she's here.
Yeah, I appreciate. Well, she's in there playing the guitar right now. So.
Yeah, I love it. I have a question. I wanted to ask you. Last time I saw you, you shared a little bit about what you used to do before you started your cacao journey, and how you started working with empaths work. When back in the day, when you were working with people with AIDS and people with that pretty much became your training. And I ask you this question I asked you, like, who was your teacher? Because you were referring as, like, you were speaking about your teacher, like, my teacher said this. And I asked, who was your teacher? And you mentioned that you've never had an incarnated teacher. Your teachers are always spirit, direct spirit.
In the late
Thank you so much for listening to part 1 of this episode. And on the following episode, we will continue discussing more about Keith's story with cacao, as well as empath's work, more of the scientific and healing properties of cacao regarding mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual levels, as well as how to let go of SSRIs using cacao, and how to use cacao to prevent heart conditions, depression, diabetes, cancer, and many more illnesses. So all of these in the next episode and so much more. So if you are interested in learning more about cacao, I highly recommend continuing to listen the second part of this episode. Have a blessed day. Thank you so much. Namaste.